Beer? All right. So since I'm from Los Angeles, we'll bet a beer against an insincere compliment. Okay? And by the way, you look terrific this morning. All right, let's begin. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there for this final half day. It's been my job throughout to sort of tell the evolving story of the Productivity Lab Network. And in a second, I'm actually going to ask Julie Morgan to help me tell that story. One of the parts of the story throughout the last 2.5 days has been the Twitter stream that's been going on. Many of you have contributed to it. I hope you've been following it. All of those tweets are going to be collected and analyzed and be part of the product of this conference. But I've been following it too, and I just want to share some of the more interesting ones with you if you haven't already been looking at it. It's under college productivity. If you go to Twitter and enter the hashtag college productivity, you'll find them. And it's just been interesting, the different voices that have been represented over the past 2.5 days. We have heard from Aristotle. You remember this quote? We've heard this quote from David Leonhardt's opening plenary. We pay to put students in seats. We don't pay for students to succeed. Several people retweeted that one. This from Nasser Paydar. Retention is everything. You don't sell someone a car and only give them half the car. And that was the workshop. That a lot of people sort of nodded on that one. Bob Shireman's quote, delivery doesn't produce student learning. It's about what the student does. Lots of retweets of that quote. And one of the big surprises of the conference, I don't think you expected to be hearing from the Indigo Girls and Kanye West. That was in the opening plenary by David Leonhardt. So if you haven't seen the Twitter stream, do check out College Productivity, that hashtag. Lots of interesting stuff from the conference. But as I said, my main job here has been to tell the evolving story of this and to keep us focused on the importance of storytelling. And to do that, I wanted to ask Julie to come up, because Julie Morgan, as a policy analyst for the Center for American Progress, at a workshop on Wednesday, she told a story that I thought was worth sharing. I talked on Wednesday about the 3 stories that leaders must tell. And one of those stories is the story of self, the why I do what I do story. And later today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But in our workshop, Julie got up and she told that story about why she does what she does. And I thought she told a very good story. It was worth hearing. So Julie Morgan, would you come to the stage? Would you help me welcome Julie Morgan, please? Thank you.
Hi. I usually try to sort of hide in the background at these conferences, so being up on stage is pretty alarming for me right now. But I'll tell you a little bit of my story of how I came to do this work. I grew up in a small city in southeastern Massachusetts. It wasn't the kind of place where a lot of people go to college. So my high school class was about 1,000 students in the freshman year, and when we graduated, it was about 559. And I would guess maybe about 40% of those people actually went to college, and most people stayed very close to home. So my experience was a little bit different. Louis, every time I talk about my mom, I have to look at Louis because he's the only person who's met her. So my mom has a pretty forceful personality. She's a very nice person, but she's going to get you to the right answer. And in college, it was no different. So she had 1 million college guidebooks. She had, all the Lauren Pope books and the Scaling the Ivy Walls and, Beyond the Ivy Walls. And so on Saturday mornings, she would, she'd like make pancakes, and you'd come down and you'd be like, oh yes, pancakes. And she'd be like, well, first, I've highlighted these paragraphs in this college book, and I need you to read them. Which, of course, if she tells me to do it, then I'm even less likely to do it. So you sort of sit at the table, and you pretend to read it, and you're like, okay, where's my pancakes? But she was a great guide through the college process, and I ended up going to a pretty good school. I went to the College of William and Mary, and a lot of my friends, along the way through college, even the ones who went to school, mostly ended up dropping out. So they would start at the local community college, and they drop out, and they work for fencing companies, or some of them are unemployed right now, and we really drifted apart. So I just don't have a lot in common with a lot of the people I went to school with, and I feel bad about it because they were my friends. So anyway, I graduated from college, and I was a philosophy major, which doesn't have a whole lot. Nobody was opening the door for me, to come work for them. So my parents sort of gave me this, gentle push towards law school. And I applied to, my mom is really a theme in my life. It's like, just do this. So, so I applied to law school, and I got in, and I was working at the time that I was applying to my classes, registering for my classes, and I'm looking at the list of classes, and it's this all of a sudden like this oh my God moment. I was like, oh, they're going to train me to be a lawyer. These are lawyer classes. I'm not sure that that's really for me, But it's August, right before school starts, and so I just sort of went anyway. So now I'm in law school, and not really, I'm certain that I don't want to be a lawyer, but I wasn't exactly certain what I wanted to do. But it sort of suited my skill set anyway to be there. So, when I first got to law school, I was essentially the first person in my family to go to law school, and I didn't really know what it was all about. As I said, mom sends you off, you take the LSAT, right, you apply, you get in. And I got there, and there's all these other people there who knew a lot about law school. They had parents who were lawyers. They had friends who worked in law firms. And so, there are some certain things about law school that are helpful to know, like that, to get a job at a big law firm, to have a guaranteed job, you really need to be in the top 10% of your class. So and the first year grades are what really matters. So it's very competitive. So I'm, standing at the law school bookstore buying, I think you just need to buy the course books. So I've got my textbooks, and I see these other people there have stacks and stacks of Horn books and examples and explanations and all these other things that I didn't even know existed, because they were so aware that they needed extra help to get through that first year. And, along the way I sort of picked things up, but it occurred to me that what I felt in law school about, wow, all these other people have sort of this inside information that I didn't have. It occurred to me that maybe that's what happened to my friends in high school, that, I had inside information. I had my parents who went to college and who knew what was important and knew that it was good to find a school that fit me rather than just one, the closest school. And so, I felt like this is something that we should be able to do. We should be able to find a way to give people who don't have access to that information access to it. And so, to make a long story short, I ended up transferring. Well, I stayed in law school, but I added on a master's program in higher ed, and then eventually got my PhD in higher education. And my dissertation work was on how people use information in their college choice process. And that's the kind of work that I do at CAP today.
Thank you. In our last session at 11:30, we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about the importance of telling that story, the why I do what I do story. I think everybody in this room has a story like that, or should have a story like that. So before we all go our separate ways, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But right now, it's time to get to our first panel of the day about institutional pioneers. And to set up that panel and tell us a little bit more about the person who's leading it and the panelists, would you welcome back to the stage the president and CEO of the Lumina Foundation, Jamie Marasotis. Jamie.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. Welcome back to the John Deere Accelerating Growth Conference. Those people look like they're having fun. You have to admit, they look like they are having a really good time, don't they? I saw a breakout session called The New Era of Combines, and I thought, ooh, I think I'd like to check that out. That sounds really interesting. So I have actually two happy tasks this morning. The first is, since this is the final day of what I think has been an enormously successful National Productivity Conference, to say a few thank yous, and then next I'll introduce our Institutional Pioneers panel. The thank yous are far too many to offer, and the many people on my staff and at HCM Strategists, which have just done a remarkable job just in general of doing this work. So I just want to say a collective thank you, maybe a round of applause for all of them. And I want to say thank you to two people in particular. The first is Kevin Corcoran, who has been hiding in the back of most of these sessions, but in fact is our strategy team leader for productivity at Lumina Foundation, and who has really been a driving force behind the work. Many of you know Kevin is a former journalist. He was an investigative reporter. He brings the intensity of someone trying to crack the story to this work about productivity. Just make sure you're talking about before you disagree with Kevin, because he's very, very well prepared, and he's just done a terrific job in leading this work on our behalf at Lumina Foundation. And I want to thank Haley Glover for her efforts as our Director of Convening to lead this entire effort. Pulling off a national conference like this is a significant endeavor. Haley's background working in the policy context for the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education, for the Indiana Commission on Higher Education, has really served her well in this unique role in philanthropy as this Director of Convening. And one of the things you should know about Haley is that as well as she's done with this national convening, she's done over the course of the last year about 80 of these different events at our Lumina Convening Center, as well as here in venues where we have too many people to be able to pull that off. So thank you to both of you. Let me invite up the panel as I introduce them so they can get settled. This is our panel on institutional pioneers. These are the people who are leading the work on productivity in higher education from a different perspective. Let me begin first with one of our key partners who's the facilitator and moderator for this session, which is Will Friedman. Will is the president of Public Agenda. Public Agenda is one of the nation's leading analytic and public polling firms in the country. Will has been at Public Agenda for many years, and on January 1st of this year actually became the president. We are very fortunate to have the president of Public Agenda having worked on our issues and been so immersed in both the broader context of Lumina Foundation's work as well as the specific effort on productivity. So thank you very much, Will, for being here. Next to Will is Bill Powers, the president of the University of Texas at Austin, where Bill has been president of UT Austin since 2006. He previously served as the dean of the law school at UT, and some of you who follow politics may be familiar with something called the Powers Report, which was the report on the Enron Corporation, which was an effort chaired by Bill. Bill's leadership in Texas on these issues of increasing attainment, increasing the productivity of higher education has been extraordinary, and he has done so, in my opinion, not only in Texas, but increasingly on a national level by essentially encouraging his colleagues in the best, the most selective, the flagship institutions in this country to get in the game of productivity of higher education. And finally, we have Chancellor Rufus Glasper, Chancellor of the Maricopa Community Colleges. Chancellor Glasper leads one of the largest community college systems in the country, a 10-campus district. And the Maricopa Community Colleges, many of you know, have been seen as leaders and innovators in higher education for many years. Rufus also serves as the co-chair of the Getting Ahead initiative in Arizona. Getting Ahead, along with Fred Duvall, the chair of the Arizona Board of Regents. Getting Ahead, I think it's fair to say, has changed the conversation about higher education in Arizona, and I think is having an increasingly positive impact on the educational success rates in the state of Arizona. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Will.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie, and good morning, everybody. All right. Just to set us up, we sometimes refer sort of informally to productivity as doing more with less, but I think, really what it's about is doing more of what's important despite a lot of difficulties and a lot of challenges, fiscal difficulties and others. And the leaders that we have, institutional leaders that we have here are people that have been really trying to figure that out, to crack that puzzle of doing what's right, doing what's important, despite a lot of constraints. What's important for students, what's important for the communities that their institutions enrich, and for the society in which we live. For those of you, by the way, for those of you who are here yesterday, I just want to say a word about students, and that is, just want to say students, 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 so that those who are doing word counts and word clouds, we're covered. That's a little inside joke, and
We get
yeah, okay. Rufus and Bill leading very different kinds of institutions. You know, one of the largest community colleges, broad access, one of the great flagship institutions in the nation, and really trying to drive innovation and change, and struggling with that really difficult work, and you know, making headway, but also, you know, dealing with setbacks, often dealing with difficult political headwinds, and complicated policy environments and complicated cultures at their institutions. And we basically want to have a conversation. The style is going to be conversational, discussing some of the challenges, opportunities, some of the things that they've been working on. And I think it's an opportunity as we get into this with our panel to enrich the really excellent conversation we've been having overall at this conference. So, good morning.
Good morning.
I think we just want to start. I thought we'd just start by just want to ask you what are a couple of the more exciting or interesting or compelling projects that you've been working on at your institutions in the last year or two that relate to the themes of this conference of trying to do, you know, productively lead student success and completion. So.
Well,
What's been going on?
I guess I can start, but I'd like to go back to the John Deere tractor first. I'm from the Midwest, and when you can walk into a hotel and you can see a John Deere and go back 40 years, it's something else. You know, I can see myself in Michigan driving this John Deere, and then think about myself up here on this stage, helping my uncle do the kinds of things, picking apples and grapes, and I think I was about 35 before I would ever eat a blueberry. I had picked so many when I was growing up. But as I think about what's going on around our country, I think it's interesting for us to look at this notion of productivity and what's going on. You had an opportunity to see the Focus magazine relative to Rio Salado. Rio Salado is our college without walls. It's about 33 years old. And I heard in one of the sessions yesterday this notion about disruptive innovation. And 33 years ago, the chancellor at that time, Paul Elsner, came up with Rio Salado, a very disruptive, innovative idea that to this day is still one of those opportunities and challenges in our organization. You have 10 college system and you have one non-traditional college. And this college happens to be a leader in online activity in this nation. But about a year and a half ago, the president of that college had been around 19 years. And I was on that selection committee. And over that point in time, they changed the way they did business. At one point in time, they were looking to be all things to all people. And they realized that in order for them to succeed, they needed to focus. They needed to look at what it meant to be flexible, what it also meant for them to be focused around what is their niche. And once they found their niche, then they built this team. And the team had to survive the change in leadership. A 19-year leader, which was Dr. Linda Thor, had done an excellent job. But now as you begin to look at what they describe as an unbundled group and an upside-down organization where you only have 24 faculty that are serving 62,000 students in terms of 24 full-time faculty and 1,300 part-time. That's a model that many people will say does not work, should not work, but it is working. And when you look at what it takes, it is a machine that works together, that thinks together, and they meet constantly to talk about how can we advance our organization. And the last thing I will say relative to this particular item is that every year they go to a sequence conference. This past year they went to Disney, this past summer. And they look at continuous quality improvement. how can we look at the new innovative processes that are out there that will allow us to take our institution to the next level? Prior to becoming chancellor, I was on the finance side of the house. I came to our organization 25 years ago. 25 years ago, Rio Salado was number 6 in terms of generating resources within our system. In the last 7 years, they have been the top resource, more effective, more efficient generator of productivity in our organization. And in a system of 10 institutions, they help to subsidize the other 9. And as they think about this transition of leadership, I was told by some of our traditional colleges, you know, maybe this is a good time that Rio should be submerged into our other traditional ones. And I had to make a deliberate statement about what their mission and focus would be and how we select a new president and a president that would carry on this journey. So this has not been something that has happened overnight, but I will tell you that for us to survive moving forward, we need more Rios, we need more options, we need more opportunities for students.
Okay, great. Before we go on to Bill, I just wanted to follow up with one question. You were talking before about this, you know, being on the selection committee and creating a rationale for the type of person you're looking for. And I just wanted to ask you to say just a little bit more about making that selection of a new president for a, you know, disruptive innovation institution, and you know, how you had to think about the team that was already there as you did that.
Well, when I was on the selection committee probably 21 years ago, what I was looking for was someone, at that time I was a vice chancellor, and I was looking for someone to come into the institution that would support our administrative team and our other presidents. So I was looking more for the fit with the Chancellor's Executive Council group and the fact that they were still evolving, and at that time they were in 250 sites. So they were trying their best to become the college without walls, sustain themselves, but also be as traditional as they wanted to be, because they wanted to try to fit in. But as Dr. Thor worked over the last 5 years or so after her initial start, fitting in was not what they were or what they should be. And so as they started to evolve, they found that they needed to be mission focused, and their mission was non-traditional. Their mission was online. Their mission was trying to find options for students who did not fit into the regular work style or space. So as Dr. Thor, when she left and went to California about 1.5 years ago, my challenge then was to find someone who could continue the movement. And what we had done, this was succession planning. We had been grooming an individual within the institution who actually came from as a lobbyist, went in to one of our colleges as an executive assistant to the president, then moved over under student services, and then started to learn the business. And making that selection, I remember the Rio staff came to me and said, "This is who we want to be the president." And I said, "But we have a process." "Okay, this is who we want to be the president." I said, "But I have a process." "Okay, you do whatever you need to do, but this is who we want to be the president." So I had to follow a process of selecting a president, but I did it by meeting with the community, meeting with the faculty and with the staff and with others to say that in order for me to have this individual as the president, you need to give me the reasons why and how you're going to make sure that this individual is successful. And what happened was a groundswell of opportunity that once I followed a process, which took about 3 to 4 months, but when I got to the end of it, I felt comfortable, my board felt comfortable, the community felt comfortable, and we said we are going to continue to have this college be successful. And the other great part about it was that the other 9 colleges accepted this non-traditional process in selecting a president internal, and it is proven to be an opportunity for Rio to move ahead in the last 1.5 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a balance there between driving the process and engaging the important stakeholders that I think is a good example of kind of skillful, you know, evolution in leadership. So, Bill, what's been happening at UT that
Well, let me focus on 2 areas. Let me begin, though, by, you thanked a lot of people, Jamie, but productivity, I want to thank you and all the Lumina people and everybody that's here. You know, productivity happens at a lot of places. We want our individual faculty and students to be more productive, departments, campuses, systems of community colleges. One place that we haven't really engaged the statewide or system-wide or even national networks together and sort of meld them into what's going on the campuses. And that's really what you're doing and leading. So I think that in and of itself, even aside from the particular ideas that y'all come up with, has been a real advance in productivity. So thanks for all that. Let me just focus on two things on our campus, or really kind of conditions on the campus. Then we can get back into some of the more details as we talk. One of them is we've been at this for a long time, and part of that was just, if not accidental, but coincidental. Every 25 years, we invite a committee, commission. 75 years, 100 years, we about, 8 years ago had our 125th anniversary, and we had the commission of 125. Citizens, mostly alumni, but not all alumni, came to the campus and spent 2 years with us on what are the things you ought to be doing over the next 25 years. And they issued a report. It had a number of very good suggestions, but it had two things it focused on. And one of them was what they called reform the undergraduate curriculum. What it really meant, and what we all meant, was re-energize undergraduate education, which was, I wouldn't say broken, but it was in need of some repair and renovation and reform. And I actually had the honor, I was the dean of the law school at the time, of chairing the task force that tried to go to work on that. And the commission and also the task force realized this is something that needs to be embedded into the culture of the campus. And so we, for a number of reasons, but this reason as well, established a School of Undergraduate Studies that was the guardian of this kind of effort. Now, it doesn't do all the work in this space. We have people in our provost's office. Some of Harrison Keller's here today, and you heard from him yesterday, I believe. But it embedded onto the campus that this is an ongoing project that was a fun and cooperative interaction with these 125 citizens. So we started in a what I call non-threatening way. That has helped us enormously. And the fact that then we even plan to reform that over a 10-year period, step by step and brick by brick, got this process onto the campus in a non-threatening way. That has been enormously useful for us when we then hit budget cuts. As you say, there are very controversial political issues surrounding this, that the effort was embedded into the campus. I don't want to say there aren't bumps and bruises and setbacks, but I think that is incredibly important, including on the productivity notion, that everybody at every level of this thing, it's not just the sort of leaders and business people, but it's everybody's job to kind of work productivity into the sort of the fabric of the institution. The second thing that is going to sound and may be very dull, but I think it's very critical to productivity if we look at it in the aggregate and are really trying to move needles. And it's we have a bit of a headwind on our campus. We are a very high cost provider of degrees because it's expensive education. I will brag that among AAU universities, we're a very low-cost provider of flagship research university education. But that is a high-cost tranche in the educational system. That's really part of the motivation. It would be easy for our costs to just skyrocket, and you know, we can't let that happen. Most people start out by looking at what in a business you call your general administrative expenses, business practices, and lower costs by shared services and things of that sort, which is an important part of it. But the vast part of the budget is on teaching our undergraduate students. And there's a feature at, I think, in a lot of governmental organizations, a lot of big organizations, I think in a lot of higher ed organizations, that you have long-term planning groups that set out goals and strategies, and then somebody else does the budget. And one of the things we've done is we never do that. We meld budget and strategy together. And if you look at just from the business world, the productivity of a business does depend on reducing its G&A costs. But it far more heavily depends on making the deployment of its assets into its most productive units. Right? Did you invest in this project, and what in business terms was the return on investment versus another business term? So we've set up a process on the campus where all the way down from departments to deans to provosts to the president, we meld those together and ask the question, if this is your next dollar, is that where you'd invest it? And what's the rate of return on that? If it's on the research side, there are some units and exercises and investments that have huge research returns, and others, frankly, that don't. And then on the teaching side, there are a lot of ideas out there about reforming teaching and student success. There are only so many dollars that we have to invest in this. And we constantly ask, are we investing, you know, is next dollar into one of Harrison's projects going to move the needle more than more advising or more instructors in a particular field? That is a very hard thing to inculcate into an academic setting. But I'll say, and it doesn't happen overnight, but that's what I'm probably most excited about is getting that embedded into the culture. Kind of just makes from one, yeah. 2.5. The other goes back to my point that I said to Jamie. We've actually put together some coalitions of community colleges, flagships, regional four-year colleges, other flagships in the state, to start to work on some of these problems together. Alamo Community College, El Paso Community College, and then some four-year universities. I think there's starting to be a recognition that there are some problems, like articulating between community colleges and four-year colleges. High school, we're working with high schools. It's getting the whole ecosystem to work better is a drag on productivity, and in some ways that's the good news, because if you address it, you can move the needle on productivity. We can come back to some of those.
Good, good. Okay, so we're getting some ideas out on the table. I think it's some of them fit pretty nicely in the 4 steps, right? Around new delivery systems, business efficiencies, and also in the couple of examples, or 2.5 that Bill gave us, the balance between the quality question, right, and the productivity question. I mean, starting with re-energizing undergraduate education and keeping our eye on the quality ball of what are people learning, and yet needing to become more efficient and effective at it. All the themes that we've been wrestling with, right? So let's talk about inculcating these things into cultures. and particularly the faculty piece, engaging faculty. We got into that touch with the Rio Salado example, for example, in terms of bringing in new leadership and engaging faculty as you did. What have been some of the lessons you've learned, experiences sort of that might be helpful to other people in terms of trying to drive this kind of change at the institution and the dynamics of engaging faculty?
I think clearly for me, the lessons that I've learned have come from working with our governing board and making sure that they had a clear vision as to where they thought they wanted to go and what we're, in essence, aligning ourselves with in terms of the National Governors Association's outcome metrics and so forth, outcomes and progress metrics, along with our own individual goals. We talked about Lumina's goal for 2025 and then how it connects with those individual pieces. Trying to get them to talk strategically about what their end statements might be in terms of an organization, and then trying to spread that throughout the organization so everyone's on the same page. But more recently, I had an opportunity with Tom Andrews, who's the president of the Arizona Board of Regents, to present to one of our faculty convocations about a week ago. And what I found that even after a couple of years or so of the Getting Ahead project for Arizona, that there were a number of individuals in the audience who really embraced what we're talking about in terms of productivity, but they did not really understand where they would fit. And we need to spend more time with our faculty understanding what some of their issues and their apprehension might be relative to this whole notion. We adopt these goals. Our board came back from Association of Community College Trustees and adopted the American Association of Community Colleges completion agenda to increase, to double the number of certificates and degrees by the year 2020. And then they adopt a resolution, and we flow this out, and everyone's sitting there saying, well, how can you do this without us and you aren't talking to us? So what we're thinking about doing now, at least within our organization, is to spend more time with our faculty. I know Public Agenda has come out and had a few listening sessions with some of our faculty, but it was more or less the leadership roles. And what I want to do is to talk to them about what I see their role is as an individual faculty and what they need to do relative to helping us achieve this agenda, and then how they can do that within the classroom. And I think what that will also do is help them understand the end statement that we're trying to achieve for the board, but then also how we are going to be using this notion of productivity and this notion of incentives, and in some cases even disincentives, to reallocate our resources. At this time of diminishing resources within our state and our nation and other places, we're having to make choices. So why is retention, why is completion now so important that we need to reallocate some of our resources and achieve our goals? And I think once we can make that connection and we can make sure that every one of our faculty are engaged, then they will be part of the process. I am so pleased with our faculty that over the last 4 years, our faculty and staff has embraced the fact that we have challenging times. But there also is a level of expectation that once we come out of this recession, that they will get their due. And we need to define whatever that is. And we're using this notion, most of you have probably heard of interest-based negotiations. That process is one that we are using now with our faculty and other employee groups, where we're coming to the table to talk about solutions and identifying what the problems are, and using language that everyone is feeling comfortable with. And it is not a level of expectation that I want an additional 5%, I want an additional 4%. It's about how can we achieve this goal 2 to 3 years from now, and then what can we contribute along the way, and how can we educate both our communities, our legislative groups, and those who will support us now and understand our role. And I think our linchpin right now is workforce. For community colleges, it's workforce. For our universities, it's making that connection to workforce with the universities and understanding how our new delivery systems can put people to work, can provide more access, provide more opportunities, and what they're also looking for is that price point. How that price point can be reduced 30, 40, 50%, and then how it connects with our faculty. But I think our faculty are going to be the key to us over the next 4 to 5 months for this fiscal year, because we still have another cliff within Arizona to go over. And once we get them engaged, and I think keeping them engaged, letting them know what their role is, and then how we really need them, I think will be our biggest challenge, but it's also going to be our opportunities 5 years from now.
Well, I agree. Getting the faculty on board and involved is critical. You know, they are the value producers, by the way, and the students. The students aren't just consumers, they're producers of this product. A lot of the outcomes and results depend on choices that students make as well. So getting that community involved is critical. And I just mentioned a couple of things. One, I mentioned before, it's like compound interest. It works over time. It has to be done over a period of time, so when a new idea comes up, you don't have stakeholders like faculty or students thinking, this is coming from left field, we better look askance at this. And I'd go back to our original curriculum reform, which did have many of these pushback and things of that sort. But you get successes, and now the kinds of things that we're doing, getting freshmen into research projects, which hugely improves their success later in life, transforming our gatekeeper courses. Faculty look back and say, those folks had ideas 8 years ago that we thought were threatening, and it turned out okay. So that'd be number one. It doesn't happen overnight. It has to be a process. The second thing is, again, a lesson from business. Almost all, I don't mean just the words of the curriculum, but the way courses are taught, put together, student success kinds of innovations. Almost all of them, certainly on our campus, but I think this is very common across higher education, the attempt is to sustain them with volunteerism. So we had freshman seminars. The idea of big university, everybody thinks you'll never see a full professor until you're a junior or a senior. Not true, but that's the sense. All big classes in the first year. It's terrible to have people show up the first year at a big university and they're not in a small class of some sort. So freshman seminars, how did they get worked out? People volunteered to do them. People who were committed to making the undergraduate experience better volunteered to do them. That is an unsustainable model. You cannot live off the kindness of strangers forever.
Or friends, for that matter.
Yeah. So I won't go into the details. Put budget into undergraduate studies. They buy off the professors from the department. Faculty like to teach the classes. Department gets money to go off and then not replace the person as a faculty member, but replace the course. It gives them the opportunity maybe to do it in a more cost-effective way. It may give them the opportunity to go out and hire an additional faculty member. But it's having a business practice that puts the budget into these reforms. So the faculty are being pulled into them, not just doing it over as volunteers. And so now as we're getting to more complex and frankly more difficult kinds of reforms, like blended online cognitive science redesign of many of our gateway courses, there are enough faculty who are very excited about doing this. The idea that faculty aren't interested in innovation in the educative process, many are, most are. They take this very seriously. But now it's attractive to them because they're being pulled into it, because we're putting budget behind it. So there's no way to get around the notion You can't go to the faculty and just say, do this as an overload or out of altruism or being a good citizen. The third thing that is absolutely critical, and this is a headwind that many research universities, at least now, are running into. When we're talking about the kinds of things that we've been talking about here and what we talk about in our coalition and throughout the state and other AAU universities, there's actually quite a bit of enthusiasm for this. But a lot of this discussion is lazy faculty doing worthless stuff. A lot of the national discussion is it worth going to college? Why are we teaching philosophy? Back to the comment, do we need another article on Shakespeare? Et cetera, et cetera. Frivolous research. The faculty will dig their heels in on that. I think rightly so. This is making it more difficult to go through serious reform on campuses. So certainly for campus leaders, there's a big difference by you're just droning on in some lecture hall and students are going to sleep is not going to attract faculty into the enterprise. Think of how much richer your course could be if you have an online component that has interaction with you and you're seeing how they are learning in the class and can come back in the next session and refer to that and move ahead. That kind of approach says, what they're doing is valuable. You're trying to actually make a capital investment to make them more productive at what they are doing. So the political tone of this is critical in engaging the faculty.
Okay, so a lot of threads there. And one of them is not just opening up dialogue with faculty or informing them or beginning to engage them, but sustaining their enthusiasm, their engagement over time. As Rufus said, Public Agenda has done some focus groups at both institutions, actually, so we've had a chance to kind of get a feel for the kind of things that are happening there and the potential as well. But also, the difficult dynamics. And one quote from one of these focus groups from a faculty member is, we're constantly bombarded with more things, and we're told to do more with less over and over and over again, 3 overs, right? So, I mean, and I think we all feel that this is a tough, transition. It's a tough environment, and sort of, as a leader, not just, getting a new idea out, but really maintaining momentum over time. So, I mean, Bill talked about it, not relying on volunteerism beyond the pilot stage, but actually embedding, things in the budget. But what else do you do as a leader to kind of keep things fresh or keep things, keep people's hope alive over the long slog of making these changes? Rufus, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, what we're trying to do, I believe that during these times we need to do more with what I call succession planning and talent management. And we're trying to give our faculty and staff different opportunities. For example, our Chancellor's Executive Group, which is our presidents and vice chancellors, met about a week ago. And one of the programs that we're moving right now is a program of academic staff to administration. And we have had less academic staff want to move into administration given these challenging times. And the fact that you can make more money as a faculty member than you can moving into administration. And then you talk about the hours that you have to put in and all these other what we consider to be non-exciting parts of administration. But what we're doing is to try to demonstrate that in order for institutions to move forward, especially around productivity agenda, a success agenda, is that faculty need to better understand the goals that we're trying to achieve as an organization and how they actually link with the legislative agendas, and sustaining an organization. And if you can make that nexus for them and demonstrate the role that they can play, then I think it's better for us as an organization. So what we've done, and we've been involved in what we call 21st Century Maricopa, which is a series of about 350 recommendations on increased efficiency and effectiveness that we have been working on for the last year and a half. And as we look at these particular recommendations, we have had over almost 400 employees throughout our district focus in on looking at these recommendations to see if, in fact, they make sense for us. And the majority of those, especially around the student success recommendations, have been led by faculty. By demonstrating what we're doing with them, we've been able to bring the faculty off the college campus and to spend time with us working on these recommendations, but then replace them in terms of their productivity for class loads out at the campus or committee work and others. And I think it's built a better appreciation of the bigger picture. What is it we are trying to achieve? How do faculty fit into this particular role? And the faculty leadership, because of their discussions around interest-based negotiations and problem solving, have really come to the organization with a frame of mind that says, we want to be a part of this solution, and we want the administrators to listen to us, and they're doing it in what I would call a non-intrusive manner. So talent management, succession planning, and getting volunteers, and I like what Bill said, is that you're not going to move an organization forward with just volunteerism by any means, but you incent them by giving them a different type of skill set, and with probably the carrot at the end is that there will be more resources in the classroom. I was intrigued yesterday at the session with Indiana University East, and I was intrigued with the whole concept of flipping the budget process upside down, and then being able to go to the productivity engines of our institutions and say, well, I need a new administrative position, I need a new research position, and I need for you to understand the value of what these positions do to our organization, and you help me fund them. Because I also believe over time, especially for communities, especially community colleges, especially for Maricopa, that we are moving to a number of our organizations being privatized. And within our state, we have some issues in terms of funding. And quite frankly, for Maricopa, we're down to about 1% funding from our state. And that was a funding source that at one time was about 27, 28%. And over time, it has moved away. And so rather than trying to retrench, we're trying to figure out ways that are tied to productivity, that are tied to metrics and outcomes for us to be a part of the engine that will revitalize our state, but recognizing that the state needs to balance its budget. So we're trying to work in terms of partnerships. But what I don't want to do is to do it in isolation of the fact that in order for the engine to work, the faculty need, again, to see where their linkage is and how they will have outcomes in terms of resources coming into our institution. And so I'm looking at this IU model to see if it can work with an organization such as Maricopa, and to think about how we can get that input and then turn them to the engines of productivity, but then resources can come back. So there's a lot of opportunities for us, and coming to a conference like this gives you new ideas to go back and see if they will float. And if not, I'll tell you about it, and I'll tell you where I am next time.
So just before we open it up to questions and comments from the audience, you both have alluded to the legislative and political environment. Bill, I know you've been having a lot of fun with politics and in relationship to your work. And so there's challenges and headwinds, but maybe some good things that are happening or hopeful things possible as well. But I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the legislative and political environments in which you work, and how you try to negotiate that, and what you're dealing with, and what you're hopeful about. Hopefully there's something that you're hopeful about in there.
Yeah. Well, let me say the political environment that I work with is actually one of the most positive aspects, and is the tailwind, not the headwind. there is a real sense in our legislature, and the legislative leaders, that coming to grips with sustainable, and by the way, I mean, what you just talked about and what you asked is the key, right? It's got to be sustainable over a period of time. That there is a very serious recognition in our legislative leadership in favor of that. In fact, our chair of our higher education committee from in the House of Representatives is here, Chairman Branch. But that's an indication there are people in our legislature who care deeply and who know a great deal about the sort of policy wonk, sort of data and all. So that is a real plus. Building that coalition, I think, is critical, and that takes time. You're talking about sustainability. I think that's the key. Whether it's the business models, it's having the faculty think that these changes are fit into their life dreams in some way, right? That, yes, they'll make sacrifices and they don't get to do exactly what they want, but their overall life dreams are being sustained because, they want student success, right? We need to capture that together. But building this coalition at the legislative level, at least for public university, or alumni level, is critical. That is the good news on our side. There's a larger political debate which is very healthy, that public, government generally, public institutions and public institutions of education can't just be like snowballs rolling down the hill that accrete stuff on the way down but never shed anything. And we've got to do things in a way that prioritizes and says this is important, and look at rate of return. Properly understood, what is it that we're trying to have as our output is different than an auto manufacturer, but we always ought to be thinking of those things. I think with legislators and alumni groups, it's not having a policy debate up here and then faculty down here trying to implement stuff. That has to be organized and connected, and that's I'd say that's actually quite healthy in Texas. But we will, I think, not be able to sustain this reform movement if this sort of other political debate, it's worthless to go sit and learn about Shakespeare, or it's worthless to be doing research in quantum mechanics or something like that. We've got to, as you say, get the faculty to see this and the students to see this as part of their life dream, and they'll reform it. As I said, the legislative side for us is there's not enough money to go around, but other than that.
I'd like to give a shout out to Tom Faris, who is our higher education representative who's here, and we also had Senator Rich Crandall, who was with us. And I was telling Jamie just this morning the benefits of a conference like this, to be able to get the legislative supporters with us, with our representatives from the governor's office and our universities and others in the same room. Our states are challenged to try to solve these issues of structural deficits and then build a system moving forward, while at the same time, one of the 4 steps that we're talking about is performance funding. And we're trying to look for new dollars. And we're trying to impress upon them how what we are doing is important, and that in order for us to begin and sustain, we need some resources. So part of the conversation is about understanding the language that we're using, understanding their language and what they're trying to do in terms of their own individual constituencies, and the fact that with term limits, individuals are in and cycled out rather quickly. So part of a conference such as this is for us to also think of a sustainable model for legislative input and legislative exchange, and to build a performance funding model that has elements in it that resonate regardless of who's in that seat. And the fact that as this economy does change, and it will change, that funding a formula for education is that return on investment that Bill is talking about, and that the lessons that we've learned with new delivery models in Arizona, the movement we've made in the last 2.5 to 3 years is unprecedented. Unprecedented in my 25 years with the universities. It's unprecedented in the conversations we're having across the table. It's unprecedented in the fact that we're now talking about, Regent Duvall and I will be going to the legislators together to talk about the partnerships that we've had and what we plan to do in terms of enhancing the productivity as it comes out of our community colleges and universities in the years to come. And that this investment now will help us achieve the 2020 goal, the 2025 goal, and moving beyond. So what I would say to legislators is that help us move your agenda by you helping us move our agenda, but there needs to be flexibility on both sides. We cannot walk away from this table.
Can I?
Yep.
You know, one of the, coming back to this theme of sustainability, one of the things that legislatures have a very hard time doing is long-term commitment over a period of time. The election cycle is 2 years. You can't bind the next legislature. So on things like, for example, capital funding and having a 10-year capital funding plan, 15-year capital funding plan that's going to alter with the economy, but nevertheless, what a long-term plan is. It's very hard for legislators to do that. And it's very hard for legislators to focus and say no to stuff and say yes to other stuff and be discriminating so it gets its rate of return. You know, do we need to put more into the community colleges right now? Do we need to put more into the flagships or into student success or into whatever it is? Those are very hard things in a democracy to do in a legislature. So the structure of how the legislature goes about this can be very important. And again, I'd say we are blessed in Texas by legislative sessions looking 6 years out and saying we can't fund that yet, but let's set up a structure. We have a plan for emerging research universities. Not that much money was available to go into it 2 years ago, and certainly more challenging this year. But nevertheless, the structure was set up with the mindset this will take place over time. And that, frankly, just takes leadership in the legislature. We're lucky to have it, both in our Senate and in the House of Representatives, as I just mentioned a moment ago. And then the talented legislative leaders need to be interested in higher education, right? And you do that by getting them involved, again, like faculty, over a long period of time, so that the leadership in the legislature says, that's what I want to focus on, education, whether at the K-12 level, at the higher education level. So a lot of the things that you see on campuses, the same thing happens in legislatures to make sure that they see that this is something that they want to spend long-term planning over. And as I said, we've been pretty well blessed with that in Texas.
Okay, so I think we've looked at a lot of different angles here on these topics. I'd like to open it up and see what comments and questions the folks in the audience might have. See if we can't open the dialogue up a little bit that way. Have a hand up center.
Yes. Any measure of productivity requires some measure of outcome of what it is that you're measuring productivity against. And Dr. Glasper, you mentioned tying resources to outcomes. I'm interested in what outcomes you're tying those resources to. And Dr. Powers, in the same vein, you talked about moving the needle, the next dollar of investment, asking departments, how will this dollar of investment move the needle? And the examples you gave about, in terms of that needle, were, does this bring more instructors, more advising, which I don't think of as being outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's the general question for both of you.
I would say that was an investment in an input. I didn't. That's not the, advising isn't the output. Yeah. Let me say, I think the question you're raising is maybe the most important about this whole idea of productivity. And frankly, it is at the heart of what I'd say is the more unpleasant part of the political debate. We're in the long, if I can just back up a bit, we are odd institutions. We take 18 to 22-year-olds who are at a productive stage of their life, and we let the field life fallow. Right? We pull them out of the productive economy. Why? It's got to be because we think if we have the field life fallow on a crop rotation, it will be more productive when it's planted next year, the following year, and over a long period of time. We are not very good. I was born 9 months to the day after the end of World War II. I am the prototypical baby boomer. Blame it all on me. We have many good traits and many bad traits. Deferred gratification is not one of them. We are in the deferred gratification business, socially, both for the students and for society. Many of these outputs are what will these people, these students, what are the successes going to be 20 and 30 and 40 years from now? That is very hard to measure. By the way, we ought to be doing more longitudinal measures of, for example, students who were in our freshman research labs compared to students who weren't 20 years from now. We've got to start getting that more longitudinal data as well. So we're looking for surrogates for that. Immediate life experiences after graduation. What kinds of jobs are they in? What kinds of leadership roles are they in? What kinds of trajectories are they in? Self-assessments of that. And then backing up, degrees in and of themselves aren't, it's not the piece of paper. There's the self-improvement part of the education. But from a social point of view, do we have a more productive, in some sense, leader, better to participate in our democratic culture, et cetera? But degree production, though not the actual output that we're looking for, it's a pretty good surrogate. So you start looking at those things. Yeah. 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 So in my work plan, right, if I'm being evaluated or I'm evaluating myself, and I have a little thing on my desk, 5 things I thought were important when I started being president, and at the bottom I say, what have you done today? So in my outputs, I'd call those outputs. So I would judge the outputs of my work month. Have we made progress on the freshman research initiative? Now we have all our, well, not all, a lot of our natural science students in there. I'd call that an output. But I wouldn't call that an output of the university. I'd call that an input. I don't want to get into, mince words, what are outputs and inputs? But those would be outputs for Harrison's and my efforts in this. But ultimately, we want more productive, enriched citizens. And let me say, in the political debate about that, I would consider a very high output of higher education that people, when they're my age, think they have lived more enriched lives because of the experience that they had in college. Now, also that they're more productive, they're better earners, there are a lot of outputs there. But ultimately, those are the outputs, I think, of higher education.
Rufus, I'm wondering how you think about this. Oh, well.
Oh, yeah. Very, very quickly on this question. What I'm looking at the productivity agenda as an opportunity for us to focus on what community colleges do best, and that is to bring individuals into our institutions and to move them along and to be able to reallocate resources, not from this notion of access to our institution. We've grown 30,000 students in the last 2.5 years. So students are coming. Our average age has dropped from 32 to 26. Just got those numbers the other day. What I'd like to do is reallocate resources to progress. How does a student move from a 0-100 developmental course to a 100 level? How do we retain them from the 100 level to achieving the Arizona General Education Curriculum 35 credit hours requirement? How do then we move them to transfer and or an associate degree? Trying to look at these benchmarks that move them along this path, that give them an opportunity, a certificate or something that shows some level of productivity so they can go back out into the marketplace and show a return on their investment. So my output's about changing our focus from access to fill this gap in between. We focused on access and transfer when I think our real work is in the middle, and that's what I'm looking at reallocating resources to.
Let me just come back to this and then add a point, because I really do think the question you're asking is at the core of this. We've got to have measurable things that we can somewhat track, recognizing they may be surrogates for larger and loftier goals. I think as sort of intermediate or closer to end outputs would be things like time to degree. Are we organizing ourselves to get people through and not have them swirl around or eddy around certain gateway classes that they can't get through? That'd be, I think, a pretty good measure that we're doing a better job of focusing on student success. I think at some level, cost per degree. I'm a firm believer that quality of the degree matters. But, we can watch out for that. Nevertheless, if the cost per degree is going up, we're going in the wrong direction. The cost per degree is going down, we're going in the right direction. So there are surrogates that are good dashboard models for seeing whether what we're doing is having an impact on moving the needle.
Right. Sir.
Jim Applegate, Vice President for Program Development here at Lumina. I want to ask, since we have you here, and take advantage of the opportunity to question that every one of our program officers and directors, everyone at Lumina asks all the time. And you've talked a lot about sustainability in your context. But I want to ask about scale, because Rio Salado, yes, I agree it's disruptive innovation, but it's been disruptive innovation for 30 years, and we haven't exactly seen a prairie fire of change across the terrain around that model. I was at a university when the Boyer Commission released its piece on elite universities research universities are not spending enough time thinking about undergraduate education, and there was a flurry of activity at a lot of high-level institutions, and it sort of trickled away. And foundations have been guilty, I think, sometimes of funding interventions and innovations, and then once we do that and we've sort of established them, stepping away, and the phrase I've heard someone use when I first came to the foundation world, and then wait for a prairie fire to occur. And we haven't seen, Irene must be spreading because we haven't seen a lot of prairie fires occurring. And the title, I thought, when I saw the title of this, it occurred to me again, Institutional Pioneers. So we do a good job of trying to work to support, not just through money, but through all kinds of ways, convenings and others, pioneers to go out, and they establish a successful homestead. But then the question becomes, where's the land rush? I mean, when do we see all the wagons starting to move? So I guess my question to you is, in thinking about not just sustainability in your own context, but what are some of the key levers for scale in this? I mean, the big goal requires 22 million more degrees that we're on track to produce. So, and productivity is a key part of getting there. So, I'd be interested in your thoughts within your different communities. How do we think about the levers for scale?
My biggest challenge within Maricopa is it's not Rio Salado. Rio Salado can scale from 62,000 up to 100,000 students if that brush fire starts and people continue to come. And they're growing pretty rapidly. My challenge is the other 9 colleges and the cultural change. It's easy for 24 faculty to agree upon one algebra textbook. And then 1,300 adjuncts go out and deliver that model. And if you come into Rio, this is what you get. That's the bundle. Then you go to 9 other colleges, and then you talk about the fact that we have academic freedom, you have competencies that are the same, but you're not going to get 350 faculty at Mesa College to agree upon single textbooks and others. So part of my challenge right now and the opportunity is to pick those pieces that I think are germane across the industry and regardless of the program or type, and to use the best practices that Rio has been able to actually demonstrate for us over time, and progressively to move incrementally in a few of those individual pieces by asking 1 or 2 of our colleges to pilot. Rio Salado is one of the largest providers of online in the country. So why do we want to not buy all of our services from Rio? That's part of the questions that we're asking within our own self, because our faculty and staff believe that they can deliver a comparable product and they can deliver it in a hybrid mode, and our hybrid classes are growing and others, but they need some of the other support that Rio provides, and let me tell you what it is. It's 24/7 help desk systems, it's the predictive analytics, it's all of those different things that allow for success for our students. So we're going to move those best practices to the other 9 colleges, and I think as we pull those pieces in, I think you will see the scalability go up throughout our organization, and then those best practices can be emulated in other places as we steal and borrow from other institutions as well.
I think the problem of scale is, it's another central problem here. We're already a 50,000 student campus. So there's scale on individual campuses. Technology certainly helps. Getting students through in a more orderly way means you still might have 50,000, but more people are going through is an issue of scale. I don't think there's a silver bullet to this, and I would say the Boyer report actually did have a lot of effect. You go and look at undergraduate education at the sort of very selective private and public research universities, and the undergraduate experience is vastly different today than it was in the 80s when Bach and the Boyer report and some of those things were coming out. But there is another element here. I am not a believer that just throwing money at something is going to be the answer. But if, consistent with my point, if we're going to have student success or some of these issues that we're looking at, we got to put our budget behind them. As a culture, as a society, at some level, if this is critical, we got to put our budgets behind it. And K-12, a huge headwind of student success in higher education is they're not coming out of K-12 ready to go. And again, money isn't the only answer to that. But we're not going to go to scale without putting our cultural resources.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Louis Soares. I'm with the Center for American Progress. I just want to ask a theoretical question. What if tomorrow federal financial aid, so subsidized student loans and Pell Grants, were based on a formula that would link to your performance with graduating students? How would that change the world that you live in?
Well, we'd get more of it. And other colleges in Texas would get less of it. So in that sense, this would be good news.
For some
but-
people.
But then it goes back to the metrics and how we measure that, right? There are other colleges that are taking higher, I don't like the word high-risk students. They're not, but students for whom the rest of their lives, K-12, familiar with college, they have to work. So it's getting the metrics. But I believe, absolutely, just like I said, putting our resources where you get the ROI. If Pell Grants, Texas grants, Chairman Branch is here, we went through that debate. Why shouldn't they be going to the students who are much more likely to succeed? Now, you don't want to profile, you don't want to, that's a very tricky problem. But ultimately, if there's only so much money to go around to support us and to support the students, you want to put it where you get the high rate of return, or people that are working on getting the high rate of return. So in philosophy, I think we ought to do that with all of our resources. Put them where we're going to get the most bang for the buck.
From my perspective, I think it's a movement that we need to change the paradigm, and we need to slowly move in that direction. For the population of the student that goes to the community colleges, it'll be a dramatic cultural change, and there will be a number of students who will not have access. So if we can pilot an approach, and I think placing financial aid as an incentive, an incremental incentive, will remove some of the barriers to a number of our students, because as Bill said, so many of our students have other obligations, they have to work, and if the financial aid can fill that and it can be sustained, then I think you can begin to bridge and see more individuals move into that pipeline. But then you're going to see a dramatic sucking sound, because there won't be enough resources to sustain a model moving forward like that unless we have both institutional financial aid, state financial aid, and also federal that flows into that pot. And right now in Arizona, there is no state financial aid for community colleges. So that's one of the challenges we're looking at. But I think it's a model that over time we'll move to in order to be one of those incentives for students in order to keep them in the game.
Just to add one more point to that, this raises another area of levers that we have for productivity, and that is choices that students make. Right? That most of the sort of flow-through productivity, student success productivity, many of those choices are made by students, and they are producers of this end product, and that is a huge lever to focus on. So financial incentives, whether it's financial aid, which does have the problem of sometimes the students who need the financial aid the most need to work the most and might not have the same, might take them a little longer to graduate and whatever. But there are tuition incentives, there are, you get first crack at your course schedule incentives. There are all kinds of incentives that can be used on a university campus to incentivize students to make the right choices. And that is a huge lever that I think, frankly, universities like ours have not been willing to just bite the bullet and say, we're going to make you make the right choices.
Okay, so our time is up. I think the conversation, at least for me, has really embodied the complexity of this topic, the hard work involved, and the hope that it represents. I just want to thank our panel.
Thank you. Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in. Right now, we're going to take a very small break and then transition into your last team time. Strategy Labs, you're in A and B with Andy. And so we're going to come back here at 11:30 and close out, but keep the momentum because we're almost there.